And he joins us as he always does on a Monday afternoon. He's William Qualkinbush. Qual, what's up, big guy? How are you?
Swanee, I'm doing great, man. It's a beautiful Monday, and I'm excited to be with you. How are you?
Man, listen, I'm good. And I tell you what, I'm probably not doing as good as Brad Brownell, the way this Clemson Tiger men's basketball team has been playing. I know they slipped a little bit in the polls, and obviously I know you've probably got major beef with the net ratings, but you just can't help but appreciate what you've seen from this team. They've talked about grit for a lot of years, Qualk, and I've kind of questioned it at times, but man, this team just kind of has that, man. It's a gritty, determined group. I love watching them play the game.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was a gritty win, and quite honestly, one of the things that I found most intriguing about this particular group of players is that they have won games in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah,
they have won games, 51-50. They've won games 78-75. I mean, it's just it's a group of people that understand how to win. And no matter what game they find themselves in, no matter what kind of stuff comes their way, no matter what the opponent throws at them, they just find a way. And look, they lost to Wake Forest, and Wake Forest was better. And some days you're going to be better. They didn't really have a chance to win that game. They didn't play well enough, and Wake Forest shot the lights out. It was just it was an unbelievable performance by Wake on their home floor. And so they probably deserve to drop in the rankings. But you come back home, you're down 2 players. I think the absence of Chase Hunter is really, really important for this team because you just don't have a lot of help there in terms of a veteran that understands what they're trying to do offensively. You go in without those guys. And by the way, you're without the same guy you were without the first time you faced Virginia Tech at their place when they didn't have one of their guys that they got back. So, in the first meeting with Virginia Tech on the road, you could say, well, your guy was out and our guy was out. It canceled out. Well, Clemson's down 2 starters. Virginia Tech, I think maybe 1 role player was out for them. So Clemson didn't exactly win that or even tie that injury exchange, if you will, on Saturday. And they were still able to win it. Swanee, they went 11 minutes in a game. It was really like 10 minutes and 58 seconds or something like that without a made field goal. And they went from up a couple possessions to down a couple possessions, but the reason they were able to do that is because they got stop after stop after stop.
right.
It was an unbelievable win from that standpoint, and it was a win that you needed because you're coming up on a stretch of schedule where one of 2 things is true. Either you're going to have a game that's not going to help you in the net rating, like the next 3, or you got games like the next couple after that where it's going to be very difficult to win those games. You needed to find a way to get this win against a team that has played better than its record in the league, a team that you consider one of your peers, and that gives you a season sweep. And that's a really difficult thing to come by in the ACC, I think, especially for a team that's well-coached and talented like Virginia Tech.
Again, he's William Qualkinbush. He joins us every Monday out of bounds with Qualk and Ben on 105.5 The Roar and the Upstate on Twitter at Qualk Talk. So I've seen a lot of Clemson Tiger basketball seasons, Qualk. I've seen a lot of them, that have, I can't say a lot, but I've seen them start good and they kind of fall off at the end. But with the age that this team has, right, with a mature Hunter Tyson and certainly a Brevin Galloway and what he brings to the table, and it's not like PJ Hall is a spring chicken either. If there's kind of this bright spot that I look at, it doesn't feel like the season, quote unquote, right, is going to catch up with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, I was thinking back maybe, I don't know, a week or 2 ago about the team in 2019-20, that team right before COVID that was going to play Florida State in the ACC tournament. That was a very young team. You had Alamir Dawes and Chase Hunter that were young players on that team. And I remember Brad Brownell talking a lot about how in college basketball, that was the first time you started kind of hearing the phrase get old, stay old. Brad Brownell started talking about that. And his team was younger than everybody that played that year. And so they were a team that, kind of like this Virginia Tech team, they were playing better than their record. They were a tougher out than their record might indicate. But they just couldn't put it together because they hadn't been through any battles. And then even the last couple teams, you still had some youth in the experience in spots. And I got to say, this team has been able to lean a little bit on its young players, those freshmen, those sophomores. Not a ton. You haven't required any of those guys to be stars or to be, big time night after night players. That's the older guys. And that's why I think this team is special, because it's still a developmental program. It's still a place where you're going to come as a freshman and you're going to kind of marinate for a couple of years before you bust out. Hunter Tyson is an example. That PJ Hall is an example of what happens when a really high-level player and a high-level talent ends up getting into that culture. Honestly, one of the things that I think is interesting to note about Brad Brownell in terms of talent selection is watching what Lynn Kidd was able to do for Virginia Tech on the floor, a guy that they brought in a year early after he reclassified with the idea you were going to redshirt and then you're going to play a little bit as a freshman and you're going to really be ready as a sophomore. This is that sophomore year, Swanee, and he looks ready. Not ready to be a star, but he looks ready to contribute. And the same thing for Omax Prosper. Omax is getting 15 and 6 at Marquette, and he leaves, which is kind of a frustrating deal for me because he leaves when the coaches are telling him, hey, it's going to be a couple years, but you're going to be a really good player. And for whatever reason, he didn't like that coming from Clemson, but he liked it fine coming from Marquette. And so he's doing exactly what Clemson's coaches told him he was going to be doing. Lynn Kidd doing exactly what Clemson's coaches told him he was going to be doing. There's a plan. There's a process. They know when they look like a piece of clay what it's going to become. And I think that helps them try to solidify a really, really strong foundational culture built on veteran players with contributions from freshmen that don't go beyond their capabilities. I think it is a beautiful roster to watch because you see those things working in tandem all the time.
Tim Beret tweeted, and I brought this up earlier in the program, the ridiculous numbers that Dylan Hunter's had in league play with his few turnovers, which is just incredibly impressive. 106 minutes, 1 turnover. And I can't help but think of what the benefit for this team could be at the back end of this season, ACC tournament time, potential NCAA tournament time, to have gotten these minutes for some of these young guys as well now that maybe otherwise would have been watching a lot of basketball. Now they've been playing. Now, I mean, the depth of this team, I would say at this point, is greater than it was at the beginning of the year because of a couple of injuries.
Yeah, and you know what? It sometimes, and I'll say something that's, I love Brad Brownell, but I'll say something that's a little bit critical of him now. You got to earn trust with him. And it's a long road to hoe to earn trust with him. If you're a freshman for Brad Brownell, it takes an awful lot for him to be able to trust you. I think he has modified his approach a little bit because he knows that he needs some young guys. I think he did that about 3 or 4 years ago. He started to kind of do that. And he still doesn't trust everybody the same. I mean, I think Dylan's got a little bit of a different leash than, say, R.J. Godfrey or somebody like that. And we know it's taking Chauncey Wiggins a little bit of time to kind of get going in that way. So I'm interested to see how that develops over time. But, he's been able to pick out spots to use those guys. And then there have also been times where he hadn't been able to pick out spots to use those guys, where they've been thrust into duty. I'm thinking specifically about Beadle. I know he's a redshirt, but he still is a first-year player on the floor. And with Dylan Hunter. And with Beadle, he's a little more of an enigma, a little more of a loose cannon. He's just he's got the ability to make some big plays, but he can get you in a bad spot. Hunter's a little more of a tentative player right now. And I mean that in the most positive sense because you're not going to see him turn about. He got 1 turnover in 100-something minutes or something like that. I mean, it's just a really, really solid player from that standpoint. You might think about him like, I don't know, Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy, he threw for over 300 yards against Seattle, but all he's doing is making the right play. He's not, filling up a highlight tape. He's just making the right play. And Dylan Hunter seems like a guy that's got an advanced IQ. He's got some physical tools that allow him to be able to create. He's a bother defensively, which you like. His shot's coming. He doesn't have a lot of confidence out away from the rim right now. But if that comes in time and you can keep him, maybe add a little more playmaking ability, but keep him sort of cautious by nature, not wanting to make a mistake, but aggressive when the time is right, then I think you're going to have a really, really special player because most of the time, Swanee, you have to pull the reins on freshmen and tell them, not right now, not like that. We don't need that shot. We don't need that play. We don't need that. Yeah. We don't need that foul. And with Dylan Hunter, you almost have to do the opposite. You almost have to be like, hey, you can go score right now. Hey, you can maybe take a chance or two defensively because you're quick enough to be able to do it and get back. So I kind of like that. I like somebody who comes in with a great deal of self-awareness like that, because it means that they're not quite as rough around the edges and you don't have to do quite as much molding them out of some bad habits.
Now, Qual, this feels like a moment where I ask you a question and then I should probably finish it by saying I'll hang up and listen. Your thoughts on the net ratings and just Clemson being passed by Virginia Tech after the Tigers beat them. I know it's a weird bunch of rigmarole, but just your thoughts on it.
Well, here's the thing. I think we ought to have metrics that match what we say we believe, okay? And I'm a proponent of the net rating. You know, I had one guy on Twitter, and Tom, good guy on Twitter, he thought that we should go back to RPI because the RPI seemed to have a better grasp of what Clemson's doing. Here's what I'll say about RPI. It's way too dependent on who you play. Way too dependent on who you play. And not dependent enough on how you play. So what we did with the net rating is we added the how you play element and changed it from, hey, if we just schedule a bunch of good teams, who gives a crap if we beat them? We played them really hard and we played a tough schedule and we won enough games. And so we'll just get in over a team that, you know, maybe plays in a lesser league or something like that. Maybe it's a team that's a little bit of an outpost. You can't get home games, so you're losing games on the road. I mean, there's lots of reasons why the RPI is flawed. Now, I'm gonna say I don't have an issue with the net in as much as I know what it does, I know what it doesn't do. Here's what I have an issue with. I don't understand why we need one metric to do the work of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 metrics. And let me explain.
Okay.
Swanee, you can, I can give you 2 different aspects of something, and I can tell. Let's say I've got a picture frame I want to put on the wall, and I give you the height and the length of that picture frame. Now you can kind of figure out how that picture frame is going to look without me telling you the square footage of the picture frame, right?
Sure.
Okay, so I just want to make sure we're tracking on that.
Yeah, I'm with you.
You don't need one metric when you can kind of figure out what 2 metrics are telling you, okay? That's what I think the net it struggles with, because we don't know what percentage of it is the results-based part, the strength of record, those kinds of things, the resume stuff, the RPI, the classic RPI formula. We don't know how much of that is that and how much of it is the efficiency numbers. I was talking to Amanda Butler about this earlier this season when they were playing a team that really was not going to have a good year. And she said, you know, we don't really know this, but we assume that there's a lot of efficiency-based stuff that goes into the net rating. And so we have to run up the score on these teams. She flat out said that. But we don't know that, and we don't know how much that matters because we don't know the formula. I think we are smart enough, Swan, to be able to say, this is your strength of record. This is what Ken Palm and the BPI and Sagarin says from a predictive-based standpoint. I'm going to, as a human being with a functional brain, I'm going to take those numbers and I'm going to try to figure out who's better based on those numbers. I'm going to try to figure out about where your team should slide. And then human beings can decide that. I don't need one metric to tell me up and down who's better and worse. And I'll give you another one. I don't think we should care as much about a rating system where it doesn't matter what you're rated as much as it matters what your opponents are rated for the quad 1, quad 2, quad 3, quad 4 stuff. Those are arbitrary lines. Like, I love a good quad 1 win, baby, and I hate a quad 3 loss. But the line between a quad 2 loss and a quad 3 loss is arbitrary. It's totally arbitrary. Somebody made it up to justify a formula that we don't even know what it is. I think there needs to be more transparency. We need to be better about figuring out how to weigh different metrics and let the committee be committee members that are human beings with a brain rather than babysitting them and holding their hand and having this one metric because we feel like we need to. It's just not necessary anymore.
Yeah, I can't understand any system where a team gets beat and passes the team that beat them. That does, like, to me, doesn't compute. But anyway, we'll turn our attention away from basketball for a minute because we went about 15 large there, talking about the Tigers and the metrics of the net ratings. I do want to ask you about the news that kind of came out yesterday. James Skalski, former Clemson Tiger linebacker, going to get his coaching career going. I think everybody probably saw this taking place at some point for Skalski, just kind of giving his nose for the game, if you will. But it's going to be with Brent Venables out at Oklahoma. And Qualk, I'll tell you, I think it's awesome. Those two guys have a relationship that is just probably indescribable in a lot of respects. The camaraderie and the support that those two both gave each other throughout Brent Venables' time at Clemson. Just your thoughts when that news came out.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I thought it made sense. You know, if people are going to call you a coach on the field, you might as well be a coach on the sideline, right? And so Skalski's doing that. It's like if somebody called me the mouth of the South. Well, I should probably do talking, right? Skalski has that. He just has that innate ability to communicate. And you know what? I wonder. At first blush, I was like, God, he could have done that at Clemson. He'd be such a valuable resource. But ultimately, he wasn't his brain isn't tied into whoever the defensive coordinator at Clemson's brain is. His brain is tied, inextricably linked to Brent Venables. And what Brent Venables did for him in the development and the hours and hours and 100 games or whatever, you know, how many 50-some games that he played, that's the guy that you could tell had a deep level of respect and understanding for what Brent Venables was trying to do and what Brent Venables was trying to get him to do. And so I applaud him for going and trying to, again, learn a little bit more from a little bit different perspective from Brent Venables. And you know what? If he's processing information the way that he was as a linebacker, if he's able to do that as a coach, then he'll be a coordinator at some point. Because I think that guy's well-liked by his teammates. He demands a lot of people. He holds people accountable. And as we said, he just has a great knack for the game, a great feel for the game. I think being with Brent Venables at Oklahoma will only enhance those traits for him. And so I'm excited to see what he does moving forward. I think most Clemson people are going to root for him.
Oh yeah, I think so. And I think the other thing too, right? Like he's starting off young. He's not, and I'm sure it's hard to give up the game that you love, but clearly when you look at, you know, watching the NFL this weekend, I mean, his mold is really not made for the NFL game. And so good to see him like be able to process that as a human being and recognize, hey, I can still give back to this sport I love, but maybe not on the gridiron like I would like.
Yeah, and let me tell you this, that Oklahoma defense needs work. Man, it needs work. And I've said this before about Clemson support staff. I think one of the really underrated elements of the drop-off at Clemson the last couple of years has been the brain drain. When a lot of these guys have become head coaches, a lot of really smart support staffers left with them. Some of those guys maybe weren't as good at assistant coaches as they were behind-the-scenes guys. And there were guys that were in Clemson's program for, 5, 6, 7, 8 years sometimes. And so there's a comfort level with assistant coaches and their support staff. I think Brent Venables is trying to maybe build that army of brains behind the scenes, so to speak, and eyeballs behind the scenes that Clemson had. I think it's a big reason why Clemson made 6 straight playoffs and won 2 national championships, because you got guys behind the scenes who were able to do the work so coaches didn't have to. They can focus on other stuff. I would not be shocked if Brent Venables doesn't get a lot of that type of responsibility behind the scenes and in the film room and studying and scouting and things like that to James Skalski as he becomes a GA.
Qualk, buddy, always appreciate you, my man. Have a great week.
Thanks, Swanee. Always good to be with you.
Again, that's William Qualkinbush, out of bounds with Qualk and Ben on 105.5.